found really, really interesting about the dessert topic is I could have gotten to know each and every one of you a tiny bit better if that meeting was organized a tiny bit different. So what do I mean? I mean, there is a lot of interesting data in there. And me, as someone who doesn't have the context, I don't know who Olivier is. I would love to know why he doesn't want to talk about desserts, right? So there is a lot of items such as ice cream. My question would be, what kind of flavor do you like? Or why do you like ice cream, and so on. So when you give an answer, what, you also want to expand, take an extra 2 seconds and give the context of why. This might sound trivial, but as you grow as a company with all sorts of different topics, when you grow as a company, I see, I don't know how many people are here, but definitely like above 5 people, not everyone will have the same understanding as you. It can be a completely different cultural background. It can be a completely different experience, because ice cream in Italy means something else than ice cream in the United States, for example, right? And if you just take an extra second to give a bit of a context on why, you save someone time from A, trying to figure this one out, B, trying to chase the person that they need this data from. I know in this context, dessert is a bit of a light-hearted topic, but consider some important meeting that someone had just now, right? And you want to introduce a person that you just hired or a person that needs to take over a task. In order for you to give them all the context that you have accumulated throughout this time, it becomes time-consuming and very inefficient, because you're repeating yourself. You might be adding new information that you now have, thus changing the context. And if you have the data already consolidated in a way where you can just give a link to someone and say, hey, take a look at what's written out there and let me know what context you are missing here, what information you're missing. And then that becomes completely different discussion point, because you're not starting from the point of someone who has a lot of context and someone that has none. You're starting from a point where someone has sufficient context to understand what they need to ask the person that has a lot of context. So that's one item, and I'm going to stop here for a second because there are other things. Any remarks about this or questions?
Not for me. Makes quite a lot of sense.
Cool. Just another item that I just realized that is kind of second nature to me is if you talk a lot and there's someone that wants to add something to the discussion, interrupt. I know it's rude in a lot of locations, but this is a Zoom meeting, so it's Switzerland for all the intents and purposes, right? It's neutral ground, so everyone is equal when it comes to, adding context to the meeting. And another thing, it's okay to have awkward silences. Awkward silences are amazing because they might give someone some courage to speak up, or you just think of another topic that is related to that, and you can add the new set of information that you didn't have before. All right. One or two other items I wanted to share, and not to repeat exactly what I said here, what I wrote here. It becomes like the way you organize the document, the way you organize your live notes makes it easy to shorten the discussions as well. So if in this specific topic, I can tell you, for example, I think point 5 BI is very important. And I don't have to repeat it. And no one can ask me, why do you think this is important? And that can add a new discussion point. Everyone can go in there and read what that is and know that it's in the context of our discussion about how do we organize, why was this meeting note driving me crazy? B, that everyone then can really quickly realize I really loved this topic. And I, why is it important for me to actually explain that there is a better way of organizing this? If you just take this and transfer it to the meeting you had on the 19th of August, welcome Bonnie, how would I reference, for example, that I learned that Nurdin likes ice cream? 0.9. Okay, 0.9 of what topic? Well, of the meeting, welcome Bonnie. Okay. But there is one level of context that is kind of missing. And that is that you talked about desserts. And I know, again, this is a lighthearted topic, but it translates into meetings as well and into the day-to-day, because it allows you to kind of stack things through and save time by just referencing points and adding additional value for the meeting that you have. We already spent 20 minutes, by the way, on this call.
Aaron, if you don't mind, I would like to push us forward to the next topic. I feel like these are the questions that I had started us with, but I'd love to hear what questions the team have come up with.
Of course. Yeah, just so before we continue further, anyone have any questions or remarks about the discussion in point 5? Excellent. All right. All right, number 7. Cecilia.
Hey, Maureen. So my question is regarding agendas and documents that are not completed with topics to be discussed before the call starts. How do you handle that without canceling the call and kind of like missing the opportunity of having that valuable time that you requested? What is the right step? Do you have a timeline that you give to people to complete those? The agenda, when is the due date? Is it an hour before? What is your experience in that topic?
Well, I wrote some items in there, but I can give you additional context that I didn't write in there. There is no real right or wrong way to do this. And I think we kind of learned that by experimenting and by finding what works best for us. When I say us, I mean Nolan and I, or myself and Cecilia when we have our meeting, right? Like it really depends on the people you're talking with. But I've learned, at least before, or rather from experience working at GitLab, is that it is okay to cancel meetings. Sometimes you really don't have anything to talk about, right? That doesn't mean that meeting that in general is not useful. It just means that this week, maybe there were not enough topics to discuss, or all of you were too busy and so on. You just didn't have time to do any of that. Previously, what we did was just flat out cancel. Nothing on the agenda, we move on, right? That works up until some point. After a certain point, doesn't work. Different contexts. Some people don't have the time to pre-populate. So we moved more towards understanding what is the best for this meeting. So if we keep canceling the meeting because we have nothing on the agenda, why are we having the meeting? So that's already a topic for the next one. You precede the topic like, is this meeting useful? Do we need to have it? And that might be the final topic for that meeting. If not, you have another discussion point that comes naturally out of that is, okay, well, if this meeting is very important, how do we ensure that we utilize that time? What is the best medium for us to use? And what kind of topics do we need to discuss here? And that type of discussion will actually lead you towards either creating a completely different type of meeting or again, canceling it, because as you're discussing things, you're realizing, well, maybe this is not really that important. We can handle this async. So I don't know, again, point 5 in this agenda about talking about desserts, we could have handled that point completely async. It could have been completely back and forth in a document instead of us talking about it, right? And that is absolutely okay. Just evaluate as you go through those meetings. I'll just fast forward to what we have right now at GitLab as we matured more. Great question about whether it's processes or number of people, Cecilia. It's more about understanding the level of remote work comfortableness that someone has. So if I were to get a cancellation 1 minute before the meeting because there is nothing on the agenda, I would not think twice about it. Okay, we didn't have anything to discuss, or I did, but I forgot to add a note. So I'm going to go and add that note right now for the next time and move on, right? If it's that really super important meeting, I'm going to ping whoever canceled the meeting and say, I'm sorry, we need this urgently, which would practically never happen because I would have been prepared for that meeting beforehand. But what I've also learned right now is that we need to give people a bit of a heads up. So if approximately 5 minutes before the meeting, no one even opened the document, I would just let people know, all right, we don't have anything in the agenda. We're moving to next week. Please make sure you add items for the next time. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, it does. It's still, I'm not sure it's the right use of your day or your hours, since you shouldn't be waiting until last minute to see if you're going to be busy for the next 25 minutes or 50 minutes, or if you're going to be working on something else. So I understand your point, but as in the planning of making your day productive, it's a risky approach.
It absolutely is. You're absolutely right there. Again, it's more about what level of organization different folks have, right? Different folks might not be as organized as you are, right? Like you might have this pinned down exactly like the order of items that you'll do today. Some people have more a day that is less structured. So again, this is why it's important to take a look at who is the participant in the meeting and why they're doing these things the way they're doing them, and trying to address that rather than just having like a blanket process that says we cancel the meeting half an hour beforehand. Previously we had that at GitLab, right? At the beginning we said, if by that day you don't have anything in the agenda, we cancel things out, right? Now that we have more people that can handle this irregularity, we kind of got it down to like a couple of minutes and so on. But previously we also had this, okay, next day agendas, nothing on them. We cancel the meeting, we move on. You freed up a couple of hours of your day.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course, thanks for asking. I see that Bonnie has a question. Bonnie, you want to verbalize?
Yes, I was about to add a link to what I just mentioned. There's a topic on the meeting norms where there's something called the pre-close summary, where 10 minutes or 5 minutes before the end of the meeting is paused and the agenda for the next meeting is written down. So I was wondering if that's frequently observed, because then that would mean that we almost always have an agenda for the next meeting beforehand.
That's a really, really good point. And what I think from my experience, that works great in environments where you work together within those meetings, right? When you have items that are not necessarily moving throughout the week. So if that is your work day, that can work really good, right? Like you have the shared context already, you prepare the meeting together for the next week, and then you go have marching orders on what you need to do, and you come back reporting the status. So for the status meetings, that is perfectly fine. But for the meetings that are more fluid, where things are changing throughout the week, it can become a bit cumbersome because you're spending extra time preparing the meeting, and by the time you come to the next one, everything is invalidated, right? Everything already moved on. You worked async on everything, so you now need to spend time decomposing what's done, what's not done, and so on. So it really depends on what kind of work you do within those meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. And thanks for adding the links. Nicholas, you have point 8.
Yes. I was reading on the meeting norms at GitLab, and I came across the 70-30 rules, and I wasn't sure exactly what it meant. There was some listening, some talking, and so what I understood a little bit, maybe completely wrongly, was, is it 70% listening and 30% talking?
Yeah, that is exactly how you, that is exactly correct. So in the case of this meeting, you're doing the 70-30% rule correctly. You're asking me a lot of questions and I'm talking a lot, but I still see engagement from your side. That is the 30%, right? Like you're asking questions that are important for you. And I'm, in this case, the external communication point. I think one of the reasons why that was developed within GitLab is we have a lot of points of contact in public with folks in async form, but we don't really get a chance to talk in sync with people. So it's very dangerous for us to try to explain now everything instead of actually getting that feedback from our customers that they need something, rather than us telling them, hey, but look, all these great things that we built or that we can offer you. So instead of making it into a sales call, make it into a learning call. And that's one of the reasons why you have that 70-30%.
Got it. Okay, makes total sense.
Nolan, you have a question.
Yeah, I remember seeing somewhere in the GitLab handbook, and I'm sorry I'm not finding the link right now, but there's this concept of don't present in meetings, that meetings should not be for presentations, they should be for listening. And I thought that this seemed related, and I'm curious, like, I think it's such a natural habit in most other companies to use a meeting to present. It's like, I've prepared a deck, I'm going to organize a meeting, and I'm going to have everybody, and I'm going to talk through that deck. I'm curious, does that actually work at GitLab, and how do you help enforce that, especially when new people come in and want to present to you in a meeting?
So this absolutely works, and it is absolutely how things are at GitLab. Now, whether in every single meeting that is true, I cannot claim. But in the meetings where you have a lot of folks, where the meeting is very expensive. In this case, this meeting is very expensive, right? We have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 15 people in the call, which means if I'm now to just share the screen with you and show you what's written on the deck and read what's written on the deck, that means we have probably 14 people who are completely disengaged from the conversation because they already went through the slide deck. And if they didn't, they can, scroll through it very quickly and get the general idea. So instead, this is one of the meeting preparation items, Cecilia, as well, where if there is a slide deck that someone needs to present, you prepare that slide deck, add it to the meeting beforehand, automatically you have a topic. And the first point is not for that person to present this, but the first point is, who has questions? Can you reference a slide? And then we wait. And I kid you not, we had so many meetings where you have the the first 2 minutes of very awkward silences, like everyone is just sitting there, and the presenter who has data, right? Like they created the slide, just has that link there, and they're just sitting for some questions. And after a while, either someone gives up and says, okay, well, I have actually a question and I'm going to ask, or there is really no question, everything was clear in the slides, so we move on. We give people 20 something minutes of their lives back, and we end the meeting. So we shared that. It's inefficient, but it gave an option to people to actually ask questions. So most of the time that I participate in meetings, that is how I see things actually function. Cool. And how do we enforce it? That was another additional question. We just repeat over and over again. So whoever is in the meeting repeats to the presenter, hey, point whatever in a handbook says you shouldn't present. Could we ask questions? What helps is when that person actually has questions. That helps a lot. But there is a lot of training by just being nice about it and asking, hey, can we not present? We have this way of working where, we prepare for meetings. Sometimes I've seen people who are supposed to be driving those meetings actually say, all right, if we don't have any questions, how about we take 2 minutes to take a look at the slides and then come back with any questions. So use those 2 awkward minutes to actually catch up if you didn't have a chance to.
Thank you.
Cool. All right, number 9, Nicholas.
Yes, so I was also reading in GitLab norms that a lot of meetings end up in merge requests. Do all meetings end up with merge requests? Okay.
Unfortunately, not all of them. It's becoming harder and harder, especially when you have meetings that are related to personnel, when they're related to general organization, right? Like you need to talk about how certain work needs to be done according to something that is already written out. So not every meeting will end up there, but I can freely say that when we were smaller, much, much smaller, only a couple of people around, all of those discussions we had were ending up with a merge request, because all of those discussions were about the actual work specifically, rather than process, organization, individuals, and so on. Because when you're a smaller team, it's much easier to establish the trust, much easier to kind of take shortcuts and so on. As you grow bigger and as you add more people, you kind of need to create some frameworks for people to work within. So it becomes a bit harder to get things done. But for example, in this meeting, I'm assuming a lot of you are getting some information for the first time, and it would be outstanding if from this meeting you get at least 5 merge requests to your handbook that improve your own handbook. Like I've tried, whatever we've discussed here, and it worked. So I'm adding this to the handbook to see whether others can benefit from it, or whether we can make it a company policy, for example. So now is the actual time to make sure that your meetings end up in merge requests, not in this specific meeting, but as you are small company still.
Got it. Thank you.
Excellent. So I hope I'm going to pronounce your name correctly. Minza, you have the question next.
Yeah, I've noticed that in GitLab meetings, usually everybody jumps in and is involved in note taking during as they're typing or on behalf of each other as well. How do you encourage others to contribute in this way? As you know, in a lot of our meetings, the burden ends up falling to a few people to take notes.
Yeah, as I previously I think mentioned at some point, this is hard, right? Like not everyone is good at taking notes, multitasking, doing multiple, like following the conversation and also typing, or can type fast enough. In larger meetings, this ends up being just a question of who can be the note taker. And sometimes there are multiple people that raise their hand and they take the notes. What I've seen work well is when you have multiple note takers, that they take turns. So, for example, in the first part of this conversation, Nicholas was taking a lot of notes. I'm sure he's tired already, but if someone else was there, they would be able to now continue taking notes. Nicholas will return in the second part of the meeting and continue, right? And you kind of do work off of each other. What I've also seen work well is what you've seen me do in smaller portions a couple of times, where I just stop the whole meeting and I write things down. As in, okay, I need to take this note. And then you're all looking at me taking a note, which is very inefficient. At the same time, it's a signal that this is an important item. We do need to take this note. And also a signal, well, maybe you can help me not trying to do three things at the same time. Talk with people, drive the conversation, and also take a note. And over time, that becomes a habit. You're, again, small enough team where you learn to trust each other, you learn to work with each other well, and you'll naturally find this as you get into the groove of the things. One other thing that I think is important here, we, apart from stating this in our handbook, that everyone is responsible for taking notes, this is literally a part of the job, right? So you are not necessarily, at this size of GitLab at least, you're not necessarily going to be evaluated less because you're not taking notes in one meeting. But earlier, when we were much smaller, it showed your engagement with the topics. So you would try to take those notes and that would be a part of your job. And you might not take everything. You might take just part of them, but that's also fine, right? Like you're helping write this down. And again, just to repeat why this is important. This is important even with the recording that you have right now. You don't have the time to scroll through the recording every time. Like you're just going to go quickly through the notes and find that one thing that is interesting for you. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thanks, Marian.
Yeah, so it's keeping each other accountable as well, right? Like who wants to take notes? Can someone take notes? Okay, stop the meeting for a sec. I'll take the note as a final signal that we all need to pitch in a bit. Cool. Nolan, next question, 11.
Yeah, you addressed this a little bit in 8C of how you reinforce the norms, but I think that there can be I certainly feel rude when I see somebody doing something that I think is not in the handbook or not in the style. And it feels rude or confrontational to sort of repeat and remind. So I'm curious a little bit about elaborating on you say you repeat over and over, the handbook says you shouldn't present. Can we ask questions instead? One, what are some sort of polite ways that you've seen people do that? And then one that I'm particularly interested in is how GitLab helps do this, especially around having conversations in public channels, because that's something that kind of we all kind of requires any two people that have started a conversation in a private chat to kind of make that determination or make that switch.
I'm taking a note here just to express like one of the items that is frequently used, right? Like you're right that it can be considered very rude to correct someone and slap them with a link and say, you're doing this wrong, here's the link. And that can make people feel like they're always failing, which is not what you want. Absolutely not. One of the small tricks that I've learned over time that can actually be very helpful and very efficient is explaining again. Instead of saying, here's the link, move on, explain, hey, can you consider doing this, and this because it helps me this way, or it helps someone else this way. Oh, by the way, this is here is a link to how we do it in how we do it here, and then link. And over time, it becomes a second nature to first check the link somewhere else, right? Instead of actually going and doing something, you first check whether it's on the handbook. How does this actually work at this place? Just remind yourself it at your own time. And then you go and do something. And then if you get corrected, now you learn new piece of information, right? Like new piece of information is, I didn't even know that we have a communications handbook. Oh my God. So I'm going to learn that. I'm going to read through that and see whether I need to adjust some of my actions to help others. So that's one thing. And another thing that I think is here really important is we have this as part of our company values, that you're always assuming positive intent for what people are doing. And I know it sounds very small when I say it like this, but I kind of think this is the core of things. When I give a link to, I don't know, Cecilia, for example, Cecilia is not going to assume that I'm doing that to just show that she did a poor job at something. She can assume that there is a reason why I did that. And the reason why I did that was to better something that we are doing in the company. And I wanted to share the knowledge that I have rather than show that she didn't know something. And this really all begins with trust. So it then becomes much easier to say, hey, consider doing this, this, and this. Here is the link. So this is more of a teaching opportunity rather than showing that someone did something wrong. You had one other question, but I think I forgot. Slack public channels?
Let's instead, we have 3 minutes left. I want to make sure Penny gets a chance to ask her question. So Penny, would you please take the floor?
Thanks, Nolan. So mine obviously a little different from meeting norms and all of that. What is some feedback that you've gotten around your communication style, which you said was pretty much direct? And have you ever gotten any conviction to sort of change it to make it more direct or compromise it a little bit for the people that you've worked around?
I change my communication style, Penny, all the time. And this is an amazing question. I really, really appreciate you asking this. So when I started my work, I was very much more direct. I was obviously also a bit younger and a bit less mature and so on. All of that kind of adds up. But the point is that direct style could actually hurt people, right? When I focus on this is what you need to do, it sounds like a direction, right? Like you have to do it. It's not conversation anymore. It's an order. And that doesn't work for everyone. I've been lucky enough that I've gotten feedback from people that felt comfortable enough. Again, referencing you back to the trust. They trusted that I'm doing this because I want to do something better for everyone. So they approached me and said, hey, when you said this, it made me feel like this. And for me personally, that is a sign, right? Like you cannot argue with feeling. When someone feels like something, you cannot really argue with that. They feel the way they feel. But what you can do is try to change the feeling by the actions that hurt them, right? So I would try to understand first why, and then second, adapt my behavior going forward. And this is like a large learning curve. This is not only work, this is life. I think in life, this is pretty much what you do. And I have changed and compromised on a lot of things in my communication style. One thing I did not steal, and this is my personality trait, you can read it as stubbornness, is that I never want to keep things quiet just to keep them quiet for keeping the house at rest, as people say, right? If there is information that I really believe is important and it doesn't personally attack anyone or doesn't personally affect anyone, I'll share it. Even if it's uncomfortable in that moment, even if it's maybe not acceptable to share in the context, right? Like, I don't know, completely, let me think of something really quick. Yes, I don't know. For example, we had sales number slump, go down. Everyone knows that we have the sales number drop. Everyone is tiptoeing around them. No one wants to say it. No one wants to discuss it because it's an uncomfortable topic. I would bring it up. Hey, we had the sales number go down. Did anyone think about this? Like, I've been trying to understand what's happening here, and here's what I have so far. And I've usually gotten really good response with that. Not always, but usually get. So that's one thing I don't want to compromise. Like, I speak up. And there is something that I think is important and no one else is raising it, or people are purposely ignoring it, I speak up and move on with the topic and take the feedback later on, right? Okay, this was inappropriate. Why was it inappropriate? Teach me. And that's the general way I work when it comes to communication.
Thanks, Marian.
Thanks for asking the question.
Sure.
Are we on time, Nolan?
We are over time, unfortunately, and there's one question that I thought would be great, which is sort of how do you deal with when the fact that the meeting is actually over and there's still action things. So maybe you can close us out by just telling should we handle this asynchronously? Should we follow up afterwards? My inclination is to just end the meeting, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to end it.
Yeah, let me take 1 minute. What I would do for my team specifically, I would go through the to-do items and ask, okay, we have 5 to-do items here, 5 merge requests that need to be created. Can Nolan create one? Can Cecilia create one? Can Penny create one? So you assign them to them if no one volunteered. Obviously, I first ask, who wants to take the items that are not taken currently? People volunteer most of the time. And for the items that are not, I would just assign it. And then they can come back to me and say, I don't know what to do with this information. Great. Let's talk about why you can't do anything with this information, or I'll find someone else who can get it done. So that's how I would usually action those items. So in this specific case, you want to probably take the async route, which is, I think we shared a lot of information here, and it might be nice for everyone individually to just think about it for a sec and write up what's important to them and share that wherever you share this type of thing, maybe even in this document. I've learned something from this that we don't have in our handbook already, and I'm going to create a merge request out of that and add it to our handbook.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And appreciate your time. Thank you for everybody for the wonderful questions. I'm sorry that I let the meeting go a little over, but have a wonderful end of day, everybody for who's ending, and a start of day for everybody who's starting.
Thanks for all my questions.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.